So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I am also delighted to see you all here at this Meta.Morf session hosted by Arts and Culture Norway. So get ready to dive into a captivating and final discussion at the intersection of art, technology, and society. Our primary focus of this panel, the delicate balance between artistic freedom and the need for regulation of technology. We heard quite a few things about AI today. The term AI was coined back in 1956, but it's only in the past few years that we have truly felt the impact of real AI boom, thanks to trailblazers like OpenAI, creators of transformative tools like text-to-image generators and innovative language models like we see in ChatGPT. Boom or doom, AI is paradigm-changing and era-defining, and hyped. As Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, suggests, AI will be the most tremendous leap forward in quality of life for people ever. We are now, as we also heard and seen, at a crossroads where AI seems to give our machines superhuman abilities, enhancing human productivity and creativity, and, if I may add, profitability. But how exactly did we get here? Reflecting on Meta.Morf's theme, and perhaps even logo, AI has been possible by us uploading ourselves into the digital cloud. Just like Katie said, our AI tools have come to life because of the vast amounts of human-created data you and I have made available to machine learning algorithms. In this sense, AI is a reflection of the uploaded collective human knowledge and ways of thinking. The resulting wonders of AI as a transformative force have been a blessing for many innovators and artists, enabling new forms of artistic expressions and discovery. The formula artistic freedom plus new tech equals innovation counts for them. Yet, AI is a curse for many others. Think of Hollywood actors, where they have been digitally enslaved by having their faces, voices, looks, and manners copied, coded, and replaced by AI, which led to the substantial 118-day strike by actors and writers last year. Many artists are likewise voicing concerns, claiming their work, and even the future is having been co-opted by the AI systems, leeching on and harvesting their data. Is AI nothing more than the biggest art heist in history? This dichotomy between tech-induced euphoria and despair, between delight and disruption, is precisely why we are here today, confronting us with pressing questions concerning artistic freedom versus tech control. And to stretch our thinking further, I have with me an eclectic 4+1 panel of experts in AI and art. First up, welcome to stage, we have André Holzapfel, a maestro. You can now raise up and take your seat. A maestro of both the computer keyboard and the Creation lute, coming from the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. André is nothing less than a double PhD holder who dances at the crossroads of sound and music computing and ethnomusicology. Despite a profound dislike for coding, he strikes a harmonious balance between computational analysis and ethnographic jams. André, it's a bit dark on stage. Do you have some more light, perhaps, somewhere? Let's look at that. Then, next, let's welcome Anders Hofseth, a strategist from the frosty fjords of Norway, whose think tank prowess and at the Norwegian Broadcast Corporation, NRK Beta, helps navigate the stormy seas of media, technology, and democracy. When he's not predicting the next wave in big tech, Anders can be found playing the guitar in his band, celebrated not for their commercial hits, but for the pure joy. So, next, joining us from the scenic highlands of Scotland is Sarah Cook, a trailblazing curator and professor of museum studies at the University of Glasgow. Whether she's stirring the pot of digital art at Scotland's Neon Digital Festival or rethinking curation at Tate, Sarah is always at the digital frontier. She crafts exhibitions that aren't just shows, they are visionary quests into the heart of new media. And fourthly, meet Birgitte Aga, a crusader of digital rights and a creative technologist from the future forward streets of Oslo. At the Munch Museum there, she's not just the head of innovation and research, she's a powerhouse championing the artistic and ethical application of conversational AI. Her project, Reclaiming AI, isn't just a voice assistant, it's a feminist manifesto in digital form. Then finally, the fifth panel participant, our custom-made AI, listening in on our conversation, and it might also interrupt to ask us questions. It's an AI system built upon OpenAI's ChatGPT-4 and the Azure speech service, and coded by vReality and Breach VR here in Trondheim. With this great lineup, let's tune in for a symphony on ideas on art and AI. And towards the end of the panel, we will also give, of course, the audience, you in the audience, some time to ask questions. So, just to check the temperature of the panel, I'd like to ask you, do a quick round and ask you to, in one word, ask in one or answer in one word. AI, is it opportunity or threat? André, let's start with you. One word.
Obviously both.
Both. So you're not leaning to one or the other side? No.
Well, I lean.
Yeah, that's, well, one word. Next one. Anders?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay.
In one word.
In one word. We have a great bias here. Sarah?
I'm going to choose the word power.
Power. Power. Birgitte?
I have to just say both.
So we have a sort of lukewarm temperature here. Great, great.
Actually, no. I am quite hot both ways. That's not lukewarm.
Both ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, forward in all directions. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, then let's start with the first question I have. And artists tend to lean toward transgression, working on the edges of what's possible and probing both borders of ethics and the thinkable. I think Boris has exemplified some of this. In this context of the autonomy of art, how is AI impacting artistic freedom, and do we need to regulate technology? Birgitte.
So I'm trying to multitask and read because it's quite interesting to see what you're saying and reading at the same time. So you're going to have to repeat it. I was up on the screen. Sorry. I'm going to try to focus on you now, Sola.
Interesting.
Promise.
We should turn away from the screen. Screen addicts.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, in the context of the quest for autonomy in the arts, how is AI impacting artistic freedom today, and do we need to regulate it?
I think we need to start to just divide the question. How is AI affecting humanity, the individual, and society, and what are artists doing to challenge that? So I'm going to throw those two back at you instead. Or do you want me to answer those as well? Do you want me to answer those as well?
Yeah.
So I think if you look, well, I think we're probably standing in a crossroads of one of the biggest influences of technology in our lifetime on democracy, freedom, equality. So I think you can't talk about AI's influence on art without really talking about AI's influence on society and the environment. So that's my answer.
Sarah?
Yeah, I guess I chose the word power because I was thinking the opportunity. If you're given power, you have an opportunity to do something. If the power is against you, you're threatened by it, right? So what we're facing now with artists deciding whether or not to use these systems is a question of whether or not they're empowered to be able to use them and what they're going to use that for. So I'm not on the side of regulating use.
You're not on the side.
Not on the side of regulating use.
So free
I
flow.
might be on the side of regulating the way in which those tools are developed and the way in which they are made accessible, what you do with them. I don't think we've succeeded in regulating what you do with things as much as how you build them.
So artists have free control or no control, or they have sort of free flow of access to the technology, no restrictions.
I think the history of media art suggests that.
Let's go on to Anders.
I am in, I think, 2 or 3 minds on this. In one way, I think that, simply put, AI is a tool. It's a very powerful tool, but it's a tool. And a lot of the regulation of society is more about regulating actual outcomes. And I mean, a lot of what would regulate art today would be sort of laws for the rest of society at large. And I mean, what are the limits on what you can do that could hurt people? And from that perspective, I think that you maybe don't need that much regulation on AI because a lot of the regulation is already on what you are doing. And I think that the European AI law is a sort of sensible regulation because it regulates what you can do and, or what you can do out to society, but not how you develop it, because the damage, or at least the damage on the smaller level, happens first when the actual products you make with AI tools meet society. On the other hand, you have sort of the aggregated smaller things like what social media has done to us, which is hard to regulate on a case-per-case basis, because the larger problem is more than that when you get the accumulated effect of 100 million Instagram photos of slim people, you have people starting to kill themselves. And yeah, so I am in 3 minds, I think. Yes,
There are 3 minds.
Yeah, yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes and no,
in
and
between.
maybe.
Andre?
Can you repeat the question?
No, the screen is in the way today, yeah. So, you know, in this quest for artistic freedom, you know, how is AI impacting artistic freedom in your opinion? And do we need to regulate AI technology?
Well, I mean, it's impacting it in terms of being mainly developed and provided by large corporations. And as we already saw in the keynote before, that changes tools for artistic creation without the creators having too much influence on these ways the tools change. And that is an odd situation, and that the changes happen very quickly from one day to the other. And also, it's an interesting fact that, I mean, there's no way that everybody can use these powerful tools, because they are just way too energy hungry in general. And globally speaking, I mean, it's an illusion. I mean, it's just only rich people can use that stuff.
Yeah,
So-
but by 2030, AI is supposed to consume 20% of all power generated worldwide, is one prediction. So you have the sustainability issue, of course. But in terms of artistic freedom, you know, how does it, you know, liberate us or limit us? Of course, you have, you know, the issue of generative AI by the larger corporations. Then you have the artistic use of, you know, AI as a sort of a individually developed tool. Here at the exhibition, we have, you know, all the works here in Cook is actually have some kind of components of AI to a larger or less degree. So the question now is, how do we impose regulations on these things? Just like you mentioned the EU AI Act.
Yeah.
How does that influence the artistic sort of freedom of expression in your opinion?
Well, the AI Act surely does not have an impact on that so much, because I mean, I don't see, I mean, there are certain implications in the AI Act that lead towards a reformation of copyright in future, which would have an impact potentially. But the AI Act, as we have it, I don't see the immediate impact. But there was also another thing by the previous speaker who was speaking about, for example, the European data spaces. And she was picking up the, for example, the data space for health, where the European Union is going to pick up shared data space for health data. What most people don't know is that the European Union is planning 10 of these data spaces. And 2 of these, one is about media and the other is about culture. So and absolutely nobody knows what will these data spaces actually mean and how will they be shaped. And that's extremely important, I think, for artists to interact with regulation as now, basically, in order to raise voices and concerns about how that should work, for example.
Yeah, well, that's a question. I mean, with the AI, European AI Act, it's the world's first comprehensive law regulating AI. Yet the jurisdiction is unclear, also after the introduction of the AI Act. And my question whether this actually leads to or this unclearness. Oh, I had mine. My stream is still going on. I don't know why it's.
There's another artificial intelligence involved here.
Wait a second.
Serious perspective.
This is an interesting ghost in the machine thing. Commenting on myself. What's happening on this stage? This is like crazy. It's quite spooky here in Trondheim, you know, talking about. Yeah. No, I think thank you. Thank you, phone. That's great. The European AI Act, it introduces, you know, it doesn't concern art as such, but it introduces, an area of jurisdiction that is still in the making. Therefore, it's unclear. So my question is, how do you think this unclearness will impact artistic freedom? How will it, contribute to, for example, creative self-censorship?
Who are you asking?
And this time, I think you, Sarah. You're entitled to grab the word and be totally against.
Can you name me any other laws that have affected what artists have chosen to do with their materials or their audiences in the past? Because anyone
say
think
libel
of
laws?
Laws?
Laws on libel?
Libel laws.
Libel, yeah.
Did that affect what the artist chose to do, or just how widely they shared it? I guess I'm thinking it's very difficult to legislate around artistic intention. And this is what's interesting about the Act, is it's about use. So artistic intention, I think, is not something that is easily legislated or should be legislated. But I think that where the work ends up is the thing that everybody's wringing their hands and worrying about. And I don't think we've got good examples in the past to go from in terms of artists' use of any material or technologies. We can all think of examples of performance artworks where artists' lives have been deliberately put at risk. So even murders on the table here, literally on a table, like a gun on a table. Are you all getting the reference? I hope so. So yeah, I think that's more the challenge back, is to think about intention.
Yeah.
I'm going to just jump in, if I'm allowed. So I think it's so interesting we talk about limiting access to artistic freedom, because that's kind of what it becomes, right? And where we stand today, it's not artists' responsibility, but they are critical voices. They're challenging whether it's bias or impact or inequality or algorithmic unfairness, for example, Katie was talking about. And if we limit access to the tools, we're limiting also the voices that are challenging. And it's important to think about who's actually responsible for change. It's not the artist, it's the policymakers and technology leaders, right? By limiting the use, we're not solving the problem. We're limiting the freedom of speech in some way.
Well, Anders, do you have an opinion on the European AI Act?
Well, I think it is probably the least worst way to handle it.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, we are in a sort of situation where we're thinking maybe we shouldn't have invented AI in the first place because we're starting to see the implications. But when we are where we are, you sort of cannot put the genie back in the bottle. So you will have AI, and you will have AI at least at the level that it is today. And even if you regulate it, you regulate the good people. You do not regulate the bad people, because the bad people will do whatever they want with open models or foreign actors who do bad stuff with AI. So I think that trying to regulate what you actually do, what happens in society when you put it to use, is the most sensible way, rather than putting limits on the development of it. And then there are lots of questions about who gets stinking rich from it and questions like that, but that is sort of something you probably couldn't regulate within the framework of a European law anyway.
Mm. That's interesting, Ian. Back to your question, Sarah. You asked a question beforehand. How has techno-capitalism enabled or eroded artistic opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my reframing of your question, because you can't separate out AI from these questions of power and capitalism and in whose interests it is to develop technologies. And if you look back over the history of media art, you can see where artists have had to work in partnership with industry in order to gain access to particular technologies. Satellites, for example, even television studios. But whether they did that because it was something that they couldn't financially afford, or because they just didn't have other ways of accessing because they weren't readily available in their pockets the way technologies are today, is a different question. But the capitalism question is the same.
André?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and it's also I think the regulations that are basically happening right now in the European Union, they try to balance out a little bit these kind of power monopolies, or distribute that in different ways. Because I mean, when we talk about AI and legislation, I mean, we focus so much on the AI Act and of course on copyright, but there are many other things. So there are things like there's a Data Act, for example, and a Data blah 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 Act. I forgot now. Let's see how
GDPR.
Yeah. Fantastic blah blah blah. Okay, no, not the GDPR, something else. And that actually, I mean, the whole thing is basically focused on creating new infrastructures to enable smaller actors to access data, and that could actually also empower artists or artists' collaborations to work more freely with developing and working with AI, for example. So that's actually quite working against this power.
Yeah, but Kate Crawford, in her Atlas of AI, says that idea of reducing the inequalities is like saying, well, let's let everybody make weapons in the interest of world peace. You know, it's like the reducing of the inequalities isn't necessarily solving the problem of the fact that it's built in. It's built into this technological capitalist system that the interests of the power in the few. So we can only advocate for actually having more people at the table. It's not about changing the distribution. It's about increasing the number of people participating in the discussion.
Yeah.
Anders?
I'm not sure it will solve everything, but as far as I understand it, the AI Act is regulating the AI in itself, but the corporations behind the largest models will be regulated by the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. So in the way that the EU is now fining Apple and Google billions of euros for doing wrong things, they will probably be able to do the same thing with, say, OpenAI or Anthropic if they are taking a too large chunk of the market.
I'll come back to the AI Act later, but towards you, Birgitte. Not that the Munch Museum is a sort of techno-capitalist construction, but you do work in a big museum where you apply AI to some degree. How do you enable or erode artistic opportunities?
Yeah, so I was just thinking about it now, so when we're talking about regulation, what about the end users, the public, which I guess us as a large institution, we have a responsibility to preserve and present our collections, art, but we really are a platform for freedom of speech. And I think it's so interesting we talk about legislation and regulation, and we talk about who has the responsibility, because we're really talking about the end users, in particular in a capitalistic structure. Have they got a choice? Is there some transparency? Who are empowering them to make choices, whether that's about environmental or ethical impact of the systems that are largely subject to rights? So what we do at Munch, we work with artists. So we work with AI when it comes to kind of preserving our collection or using it in those kind of ways. But when it comes to art, we work with artists who work with the AI as a medium, a tool, a thematic, and challenge established structures, whether that be things that affect the individual or the environment, to try to engage the public to have a choice to make these kind of power structures and dynamics visible in some sort of way. And I think this kind of back to what role has the end user or the subject or the public in this, and what role has the artist in that kind of triangle.
And meanwhile you were speaking, our fifth panelist have a question for you. It's actually on my screen, so you have to believe me when I see this or read this. Considering the discussion on technological capitalism's influence on artistic freedom, how do you envision the role of independent developers and smaller organizations in shaping the future of AI in the arts? I mean, you're now a huge corporation, I guess. What's a smaller one? Anders?
I think if we're looking at sort of the big things like, say, ChatGPT, the cost for training a model like that is around $100 million, which is quite a lot of money. So if you want to make something that's better than that, it is sort of out of reach. So for making large things, I think it's very difficult for smaller companies to do that. But I think we're also, if we're going back to the regulation thing, I think we're also maybe talking too much about regulating things that are perhaps difficult to regulate, and that we should rather, as humans, try to shape into what we want it to be. Not by regulation, but by raising awareness about the things we think are right or wrong. So, for instance, a lot of the things I've seen earlier today has been sort of things that helps you see things through a different lens, and I think that's maybe a better way to try to change that bit of society rather than trying to regulate something that is inherently quite difficult to regulate.
Mm-hmm. Sarah? Yeah.
So for a long time I've been saying that one of the amazing things about art is that it can record a moment in time. And by looking at art from the past, we can understand a little bit about social, political, technical conditions of that moment. And I've had a couple of artists nag me about this recently because they've said, you know, why does it always have to be us? Why are we always the ones who have to bear witness, and our artworks have to be testament to this moment? And that is sort of what's happening right now. I mean, I loved Boris's keynote speech, and I just think some of those images will be that moment in time, and they will remain as the testament to what that technology was doing at that moment in time, only if the museum collects them and preserves them, which we'll talk about another day. But I think there's that effort that artists put in because they want to change perception in the world around them. But that's also a big responsibility to make artists the one who have to like point out the problems of technology all the
big
time.
money.
Big money.
It was a joke.
Andre, do you have a suggestion for a good tactic?
So I think it's there surely will be a larger role towards, or it's an important role that individuals take in that whole thing. It's of course it is limited by the current trend to ever increasing model sizes and stuff like that. But on the other hand, it's also really, I think it's an individual challenge now looking at it from the engineering perspective to take serious like the gap that exists between A, artistic practices, B, engineering development, but then also critical approaches in humanities. I mean, it's very hard to talk to each other, and it takes a lot of effort, and that is necessarily an individual effort also, where people have to do a decision to not just develop the next, as an engineer, the next network to solve problem B after solving problem A, but to just spend a lot of time with people who approach problems in a completely different way. And that's important there. I mean, coming back to the question from our fifth
participant.
Yeah. So that's where I see a big role for individuals, because just as artistic creation is a human condition, so is also ethics and the kind of values that we want to bring forward in our doing.
So we still believe in the individual here. And concerning that one, Birgitte also framed the question towards the individual. How can the artists empower the public, the technology's subjects, that is us, I guess, to reclaim, reappropriate, rewrite, and reimagine a more desirable future living with or through AI technologies?
Thanks, Ola. I guess, well, we see it here, right? See it in the exhibition where we heard from several artists today that is challenging the status quo. And I think it's interesting, first of all, that I think we started when we started talking about this debate about like regulate or not. Should we regulate, help the subjects of technology and the artists to use the right tool? I think like give free access to everything to artists so they can express themselves and be our compass in a sense, though underlining again that the responsibility doesn't lie with the artist. But I think, like you see it in lots of the work here, and whether you go back to artists like such as Suzanne Lacey and like kind of social practice, it's about activating people, giving people the power or the choices to understand that they can choose different routes. And just to tack back, I think it's so interesting we talk about can you get alternative choices when it comes to your technology? Can you choose something else than ChatGPT? The OpenAI model is underneath everything, right? So we have like 2-3 models that are controlling everything we do globally, as well as making the forms of expression the same, But how do we have we got a choice? Can we choose different models? And I think at least artists are the critical voices in disrupting that, breaking the tools, using them in the wrong way, hacking in. Without that, I think we're pretty helpless in trying to influence the two. I guess you guys, you would know. Andre, how many have you got 2 AI models globally that everything is based on, open AIs and something like that? Though.
Well, it's a handful, yeah.
Yeah, and a handful. So far, that's kind of dictating everything we do, say, mean, think about. So.
Any other comments on that? Otherwise, we have yet another question from our AI participant.
Let's hope it's better than the last one.
What?
Let's hope it's better than the last one.
Shall I read that? Considering the multifaceted perspectives on AI's role in art and society, how can we ensure equitable access to AI technologies for artists across different economic backgrounds? I mean, are we in this house witnessing the creme de la creme of artists? What about all the others? How to empower artists?
Well, it's up to developers and their companies to ensure that they have a diverse team. And there's no reason why you can't have an artist on your team when you're developing any tool from the get-go. And no reason why you can't have an artist as part of your user testing. Or, you know, artists are human beings with skills in the world.
So diversity is your answer.
Diversity is the answer.
Yeah.
Pay attention to who's in the room. It's your responsibility.
You have access to the best tools.
Well, it's a sort of boring question, and I feel I'm coming out as the bad guy all the time here.
Yes, that's good. Come on, hit it.
But I think that access to tools is a sort of non-starting question, because access to AI models is $20 a month, and most people, even struggling artists, can afford $20 per month, and it's usually happening online, so you don't need a powerful computer to do it. And we could, of course, question, should it really cost that much? Should it cost less? It's built on the internet, which we create, or the content that we put into the internet. Is it correct that they're not sort of paying us back something for that? So it's a sort of, is this infrastructure, and should it be price regulated? But I don't think $20 a month is prohibitive for most regions in the world.
So we should still fuel the big companies.
No, I'm not saying that.
Aren't you? It's like...
but we were talking about access, and the price for access is not, I think, the main limitation here.
Yeah.
But would you then tell to the mechanical Turk laborer who works for, what was it, $40 per month, that he or she should spend half of their monthly salary for the access to the model in order to create images?
No, you win. I changed my
You win. Spela, would you like to comment?
I think that's really interesting. I think it's not about the access to the tools, but have you access to creating your own tools and your own data sets and training your own models and making your own, because if it's just access to tools, right, they're already limited in their outcomes. Though Boris had a very nice approach to kind of disusing or inappropriate use of the tools, right? So either you got to do that, or you got to make your own models, or make your own data, build them, and have artists access to that. That's probably limited to tech know-how, expertise, and so on.
Well, in the very first presentation this morning, we saw early VR works, which were partnerships between industry and creative organizations. And we saw Rebecca Allen, who built synthesizers, you know, and so actually artists have long created tools that have then become mainstream technologies. We just don't always credit the artist who made it in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you have also the EAT row of art and tech in New York back in the 60s as well. So you think we should not control tech or let artists have free access to arts or to the technology, no limitations. Cool.
Absolutely.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one. The questioning what does the EU AI Act think? And I briefly mentioned that before. But I'm thinking that has sort of more darker clouds on the horizon when it comes to the EU AI Act, because it poses lots of regulations for the general use of AI, which I think will classify, for example, AI systems according to the risk level. And what's the risk level, you know? What's the impact of an AI technology? How do we evaluate this? And this is my main point, how it will impose the uncertainty and some kind of learned helplessness on artists when we have to, when artists are being seen as high-risk personalities. I mean, the artists we see down here, like Marco Donnarumma, he has a great use of AI-controlled apparatuses. I would think they would pose a risk in many people's eyes, perhaps not in our eyes. What about that kind of artistic pushing on the boundaries? When will that fall into the EU AI Act? That's sort of my question, or my general question, and my concern, I would say. When do we fall victim to all the good intentions, or we as an artistic freedom?
I guess I'm struggling with the emphasis of AI as the lens to understand these more philosophical questions about what artists can and can't do in the world. I mean, artists can and can't hold a rally in a main square without informing the regulatory authorities around how many people can be in a public place at a particular time. You know, like it's never stopped an artist from holding a happening previously. So I think the AI is the red herring in that kind of. It's a red herring.
Red herring.
In that kind of a question about at what point does what an artist do become so risky that it falls foul of a regulation. That's kind of like a universal question of what it is to be an artist, and there's plenty of artists in the room who could answer that about how they feel about functioning in a way that it may or may not be regulatorily acceptable to do what they do.
And I think it could also possibly be said that artists are sort of exploring the limits of what the technology can do in a way that might challenge the law on a technical level, but that would probably never be prosecuted. So if you were, for the thought experiment, if you should make laws that would control everything an artist could start to do, it would make the laws completely crazy for the rest of the world. So my guess is that for some of the things you do in a work of art, they would say it's maybe against the law, but it doesn't apply here, is my guess.
So you're kind of more positive that it will not inhibit artists?
I don't think, I mean, well, I mean, if an artist were to invent biological weapons as a sort of artistic endeavor and use them on the entire population of the world, it's maybe not because the person is an artist.
Well, talking about weapons, I like Cicciolina's.
It would be a fascinating piece of art, but yeah.
Well, Cicciolina, she invented anatomic weapons, which I kind of like. Talking about Boris pictures. Yeah. But also, we have in terms of data and privacy regulations. AI in the arts often require large data sets. which may include personal and sensitive information. That falls under the EU AI Act, which requires artists, and artists also in this room, to actually open up the data sets. So how that will inhibit or push art is, I guess, another open and a cloudy question. But do you think this will, make artists more certain to use AI tools, provoke them into using AI tools in a more provocative way, or will it inhibit them? It's a leading question, I guess.
The problem is that AI tools are extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that is both the magic of AI and the curse of AI, is that it is very powerful at this moment, and it will be very much more powerful in not a very long time.
It's important that when we talk about AI, we don't talk about it as this one thing with intentionality. It's just a tool, but the intentionality is still, at least for now, lies with the human and the user, with the intentionality and how you use it. And of course, it has an effect on end user, the subject. But I think, and also AI is lots of different things, isn't it? But I think it's interesting to think about, look at artists, and I think some which are part of this as well. This is an exhibition when you're critical to the data sets you use. You're generating your own inputs and your own system and your own output. So maybe that's one of the things that comes out of this as well, that was distinguished, the criticality that goes in, the criticality of artists and the criticality of end users, that you can actually have a choice in the models, because it's not, again, I think Katie said it today as well, it's not the data or the AI that's biased or discriminatory, but it's the use and the choice of the bits that we put in the systems, and also the lack of diversity in the people that build the systems. So maybe that's an outcome, without answering your question straight on.
That's a nice turn. How do we, as was mentioned in the speeches before, how do we ensure algorithmic fairness?
What is algorithmic fairness?
Yes. Well, in terms of mentioning on your quest, how do we ensure how the data sets are being or the algorithms are being trained? I mean, you worked on that a lot, Birgitte.
Well, I guess from my point, it's a lot about empowering, enabling, making systems transparent, giving end users choice. But I guess the choices you have is still limited more and more. I guess in Norway we're quite lucky. There is tighter data regulation law, so that's one thing. But for me, it's very much about creating communities, giving end users tools to understand the impact and the effect things has on them, and allowing them to create their own systems or using their own data. So it's, but the impact of that is small-scaled compared to the speed and the influence of bigger systems being generated by large global corporations.
And I'd like to follow that with another one of your questions, Birgitte. How do we cultivate the conditions for artists to disrupt prevailing technological narratives of AI development and resist restrictive measures in a society driven by capitalistic structures? Maybe you want to answer that, Sarah? That's on your line of thinking.
The first line was, how do you give artists the chance to do what?
How do we cultivate the conditions for artists to disrupt prevailing technological...
Well, we're in Norway, so you've done very well at cultivating conditions for artists to do things. You pay them a wage, so that's a good start. And I think you support artistic communities to self-organize and develop. I think you show their work, you collect their work, you preserve their work, you write about their work, you support them to show their work to people elsewhere in the world, and with that, cultural exchange.
So look to Norway, you mean? Look to Norway.
Well, I think it's a good start. It's definitely a good start here. And I think this new fund is a good idea. So that's a good start too. I mean, you're asking me lots of questions about the EU AI Act, and you remember I don't live in the EU anymore, very sadly.
Oh yeah, sorry about that one.
So I think artists will also move to the places where they feel they can be disruptive or they can have access, or we see that already. Artists, I mean, they move in their communities to opportunities.
Andrea, do you have any input on that one?
I was just thinking a little bit also about this. I think the whole discussion around the AI Act in terms of artistic expression, it's not. I mean, the intention of the whole legislation doesn't go at all in the direction of limiting artistic expression in any way. That's absolutely not the intention. And there's also so much of other legislation that, on the contrary, kind of rather supports development of critical voices of different things, of new possibilities. So yeah, I was just thinking about that this is really.
So you're really optimistic.
I wouldn't say that, but I think that the AI Act doesn't ruin anything. So.
Yeah, not yet. That's the question. It's a brand new act as well. Anders?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the AI Act would be the problem now.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about one thing I've been thinking about and think that we should talk about is that because AI is accessible, if we're talking about in Europe and not what it costs in mechanical Turk countries, then AI is more or less accessible to anyone, and which means that anyone could use AI for what, within reason, whatever they want artistically. But it also means that you could sort of take away the value of AI in the art you're making because everybody has access to it. So the interesting thing is what will happen to AI-enhanced art, to call it that, when everybody has access to it, and how do you succeed in what you're doing in that world, which I think uncovers some interesting questions.
There's a lot of work being done around protecting artistic illustrations from the possibility of future data model training and scraping, right? There's a project that Ben Zhao's done called Glaze, and he's done this on behalf of illustrators, and it will extend to musicians and other people who create works for commercial purposes predominantly. But I think there's as many different kinds of artists out there in the world, as there are opportunities for them to contribute to the creation of a diverse culture. So there will be ways in which artists will, as we've heard today, change their practices in response to a limitation here and an interesting challenge over there.
Okay, we're now, I would like to twist the conversation a bit back to not the EU AI Act direction, but more towards artistic freedom. What are the limits to artistic freedom, in your opinion? Exemplified, should artists be allowed to use deepfakes or any other kind of manipulative media in their art making? Birgitta.
Again, I vote for full artistic freedom. I mean, if we talk about censorship of artists or art, I think we all agree that that's not something we should do. And you got artists like Jake Hughes, who has the Sissy show at the moment in the V&A, super important in underlining some of the challenges to AI systems. So absolutely, I mean, the whole idea of starting to define tools that artists can use and not, I think, is not a path we should even think about. So full access to.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same side. I think trying to describe it in terms of one particular technology just takes away from the broader philosophical question of what it is to be a creative person in a cultural environment who wants to challenge the way societies are formed and the way we understand the world around us. I mean, I'm more interested in, are we talking Big Bang or Big Bounce? We're definitely talking Big Bounce, so it's a loop. It's going to cycle back. You're going to limit something here, it's going to pop out over there.
Anders?
Well, it's a normative question, so it's sort of maybe not my job to say something about it, but I would say that within the scope of AI, I see no need to make any limitations that aren't already there in other laws. I mean, if you're using AI to harass, or using AI deepfakes to harass somebody, then it's harassment more than it's use of deepfake technology. So I think you shouldn't harass people, but whether you use deepfakes to do that or photography or whatever, it's technology. It doesn't matter, I think.
André, do you have any reflections on that?
Well, simply, I mean, the examples, I mean, we have many examples of artists using deepfakes in very, very interesting ways. Jake Elves was mentioned already, and other artists have done that, and that's a part of artistic freedom, and that's good. Yeah, maybe it's a consideration in terms of artistic freedom who to ally with also, right?
Yeah.
I mean, should you? I don't know. Is it always a good decision to get your? I don't know, to get an artwork sponsored by some company that supports very bad work conditions for some workers in another part of the AI food chain. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe a limitation to artistic freedom, right?
Yeah, you have the freedom to log off. You have the freedom. You have the freedom to log off and to unplug and to choose what technologies you're using. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, if you can ever log off your digital and data
Well, you
body.
pay attention to your body, you know, just be in the world.
Shut down the screen, yeah. Well, we are approaching the time limit here. And of course, we would like the audience to let you ask some questions to the panel.
Better ones than the AI did, please.
We have one there and one there. Maybe in the microphone, so we have...
Oh, thank you. Is this on? Yeah. Very interesting discussion. I'm quite old, I think. So, I remember in the 1950s, when I was born, in the early 60s, the cybernetics movement in the arts. So when I was talking about Constant Nieuwenhuis, the idea of the post-Marxist idea of the freedom from labour, and then the opportunity for homo ludens, to follow the Marxist ideal of personal development. And I think it's quite interesting that artists always have engaged. I mean, from early computers, early video art, early digital, always been involved in exploring that. One of the other things which is interesting is I've been listening a lot to some of these leaders in the development of AI technology in interviews, and one of the questions which they get is, well, what's going to happen to everyone who ends up losing their jobs? So they have multiple answers to this. One is, oh, I don't know, and perhaps I don't really care. That's the libertarian attitude, which brings us back to the relationship then between a libertarian attitude towards morality and a social democratic attitude towards morality, where the social democratic attitude is to, with great freedom also comes great responsibility. the libertarian attitude, with great freedom comes maximum profit. So there's an interesting dichotomy there. But also then what we have is some of the answers they give, well, we'll probably, AI will enable us to have everyone gets paid, borgerlønn in Norwegian, I can't remember what it's called in English. And the other thing is, well, what are all these people going to do? Oh, one of the things they can do is become artists. Yeah. So suddenly we're being faced with this kind of idea of a world with millions, possibly, of people freed from labour, and then how they're going to spend their time, you know, musicians, artists, writing, poetry. Does the board have any reflection on that possibility, or on what the outcomes of that might be in terms of artistic freedom?
There's actually been a great artwork made exactly about that. I'm not going to remember the artist's name at the minute, where they've made sort of false ad campaigns for what you will do with your life when you're no longer working. And I think that the questions of labor are always at the heart of what artists are doing and how they're thinking about living in the world. But I guess the other fun joke about that, of course, is that not all of it's going to be any good. And Margaret Atwood was on a panel with a neuroscientist, and the novelist Margaret Atwood and the neuroscientist, brain surgeon, turned to her and said, "Oh, what do you do?" And she said, "Oh, I write novels." And he said, "Oh, that's so interesting. I was thinking when I retire, I'm going to write novels." And she said, "Oh, that's great. You know, when I retire, I'm going to become a brain surgeon."
Yeah, but I mean, adding that one, Sam Altman said that, you know, AI could add, you know, to each citizen an average of $13,500 of income, which is quite a nice artistic scholarship in that terms. And our AI further this question, saying, in the light of the discussion about millions potentially turning to art, that is, becoming artists, in the future, do we anticipate this shift will redefine the value of art in society? If we're all artists, like Boyce said, what happens then? AI making us all artists.
I mean, they said it in the 70s. Les Levine, in the catalog for software, which was the big show about cybernetics in 1970, wrote about how the computer would introduce a new kind of folk art. So art for the people. I mean, I think Jeanette Winterson says it's not art for the masses, it's art by the masses.
Anders?
It probably doesn't feel like that when you're an artist, but I think to call it that economy of art is also a super capitalist system. It's a system of the best people get the money, the second best gets some money, and the rest don't get anything. And so I think there's a sort of, there will be a natural balance of how many artists a society can support. Either way, and it will probably be the best or most popular or whatever measure you use for it. But I think, especially from hearing people doing different talks earlier today, that what strikes me is that it's not really the execution that hits me as fantastic, it's the thoughts behind it. And the thoughts behind that, behind what you're doing, and the sort of artistic direction you have is, well, it's like being a brain surgeon, to use the Atwood parallel. It's so I don't think it will change the ecosystem dramatically. Is my sort of from the outside reflection on it.
Interesting.
I mean, you might change artist A for artist B or something, but you wouldn't have a completely different total picture, because it's still the sort of what the art instills in the observer that is the sort of thing, and that takes some time to learn.
Well, I guess we'll get to see it when AI and Sam Altman finally makes us all the artists. Thank you. We had a question over there. With microphone, please, because of the AI that is listening in.
God, such a taskmaster.
Thank you. So I've been listening quite a bit, and I think European Union and the Act is being quite demonized, but moving on. I would like to ask the panel regarding artistic freedom, what are your thoughts on the embedded constraints on the models?
Embedded constraints on?
The models, the guardrails.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean the guardrails, or what do you mean by the embedded? Because
the
I mean, they are
itself,
kind of imposed, right?
Yes,
I mean,
the model itself will restrain those freedoms.
Yeah, but it's not the model itself, right? I mean, it has been trained, and afterwards there's a lot of ghost workers who build these constraints, right? So,
exactly.
And that's what we see why there's a stable and unstable diffusion, and because I mean, it's not a matter of the trained model, but it's then afterwards like all these constructs that are built around that in order to limit it, to bring it into unproblematic areas, and that judgment is it's highly problematic, of course. So.
I mean, is that book by Nick Bostrom on superintelligence useful here? Because I think he talks about these ideas of if we have a superintelligence, how we container it, and how, I'm not going to remember without checking my notes, but some of the thinking about ways in which we could ask the AI system to not come up with the sort of consensus opinion of what it thinks we would do in the event of, but instead consider the intention behind, like, if I were to do that, what would it be for? Okay, well then maybe I shouldn't, and that sort of reversing the logic of it. I don't know, go read the Nick Bostrom, maybe he explains it much more clearly than I do.
It's a good question, but I think we have to move on. And that was like the final question. We have time afterwards. There'll be an announcement after me. So I have a final question for the panel, because you're not just experts. I see you also as fortune tellers. So what do you believe the future holds for AI in art over the next decade? We start with you, André.
I forgot my fortune cookies. So
well, use your expert knowledge. I mean, you were lukewarm, so are you now getting hotter or colder, or?
Well, I mean, right now, the tendencies that we see right now, it's getting a bit colder, it's getting a bit more boring, because as we saw, from this model transitions from the initial guns to what we have right now, it's all more a convergence to a great mean, let's say. So okay. It's getting a bit boring. But yeah, let's hope that we have the possibility, of course, to focus a little bit more on smaller things, on smaller models, and okay. These can be interesting, I think.
So the fortune cookie doesn't taste that good. Anders?
Well, one possible answer is that within a decade we'll all have sort of suffered some kind of apocalypse. So it will mean that cave art will be back.
Yeah, okay. The doom scenario, yes, yeah, we're all, yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah. It's such a difficult question for me to answer, because I have to curate a show about this, which is in 3 years' time, and what am I going to put in it? Because by then...
Exactly. So, it's a mean one, I know,
I'm going to leave the artists to answer the question about the fortune telling, because that is kind of the job I've given them. But I think if we look back to history and see what happened, there was that boring phase, like once the technology, even with the early early attempts with synthesizers and video and whatever, there were moments where it just got a little boring for a while before some new tools came up. So we might just be in that lull moment before the technology changes again and something else happens and an artist invents something that then becomes used in another way.
And Birgitte, the Munch Museum has great things
Yeah,
ahead.
well, of course we do. I think we already started to see a rejection of the homogenized kind of expressions of some AI technologies, and I think artists are already the interesting work, and more I think we're going to see is the kind of the non-use, the wrong use, the breaking apart, and the coming up with entirely new kind of artificial symbiotic human machine. I think that's a really interesting route. I don't think we're necessarily there yet, but I think a lot of interesting artists are experimenting with different symbiotic relationships. So I think that can maybe start creating unique expressions and forms and mediums. So I think like a rejection of the polished aesthetics of established generative AI models and entirely new forms, I hope to see.
And with that, please give a hand to our great panel.
Do you want the final summary?
Yeah?
We can try it.
Yeah.
We'll see if the AI, which did have some dull questions for you, but we'll see if it can summarize the debate for us in a moment. And that's a huge summary.
That's a huge one, yeah.
I can just add that all of this stuff is going on our websites in terms of how this actually worked, and how much it costs to do this, and the ethical questions around using the system for a debate and stuff like that. And of course that the translation was not perfect, but all these things are just sort of learning experiences that we intend to share with the cultural sector and everyone. So I would like another round of applause for the panelists, and a very big thank you from the Arts and Culture Norway to all of you. Thanks.